Today we have Erica Komisar, and she is on. She's a psychoanalyst, a parent coach, and also an author. And she does have a book out. We're going to be talking about that later on in the interview. But Erica, thanks so much for coming on today. Greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Robert.
Can you talk about, in general, through the people that you work with and meet, how coronavirus has affected human behavior throughout the past year, almost year and a half?
Well, it hasn't done one thing. It's individual, and I would say that particularly when it comes to children and adolescents and families, the first articles that I wrote at the beginning of this wave of COVID were that the younger children were doing much better than they had been prior to COVID because they were getting to spend so much more time with their parents than they did prior to COVID. So, and I think that still stands, that younger, very young children under the age of 5 have done much better because of COVID. But children that are older, that are used to being in school, used to having their own friends, having their own life, particularly teenagers who are in the process of trying to separate from their parents, it was very hard on them. And, again, there was the advantage of getting to spend more time with family members and having parents around to help regulate their emotions in a way that parents often aren't around for teenagers today,
Right.
because they're busy working or preoccupied or distracted. So, there was that positive aspect of it, but I think overall, teenagers, the figures in America, the mental health statistics, even though they were very bad before COVID. I mean, I write articles and books. I have a second book coming out in October on building resilience to stress in adolescence. And, one of the things that I say in the book is this epidemic of mental illness in adolescence is really due to overvaluing things like self-sufficiency and overestimating teenagers' ability to care for themselves at a time when they still need our care.
Well, I want to talk about this because I'm a news junkie. I watch the news a lot, and which is good and bad for your mental health in general, especially through the past few years. But with that said, we've heard a lot of spousal abuse going up throughout this coronavirus. You've also heard child abuse going up throughout this time. Obviously, that's a problem, during coronavirus, but even when there's not coronavirus. Why do you feel like it's gone up so high through coronavirus? Is it because people are home all the time now?
Well, I mean, one thing is alcohol use.
Right.
When people are, first of all, people have lost their jobs. So there's been, this coronavirus has done terrible things to society in terms of there's an increase in unemployment. People are home with their spouses and their children in a way that they weren't home before, as you say. So, you may go to work to get away from the dynamics in your family, the dynamics in your marriage. People were, when there was lockdown, people were literally trapped in a house together who probably used who may have used their relationships outside of their home, their friends, their work relationships, to balance problems at home. So this is why I say it's so individual. For families who are doing well before COVID, you'd say it gave them an opportunity to be together and to spend more time together. And it actually enriched family relationships. But for troubled relationships that were troubled before COVID, it tipped the balance and made them more troubled. And then in terms of children, I think, again, we aren't used to taking care of our own children. We're used to school taking care of our children, babysitters taking care of our children, daycare taking care of our children. And so for the first time, people have been really forced to take care of their own children and as well as educate their children. So, the burden has been not only on, I have to take care of my own children, but now I also have to educate my children and I have to do my job. So I think that led to a lot of people being overwhelmed and as a result, having these stress responses.
As we're talking about kids, this is a lot of stuff's been going on with school online and also school inside the classroom. Depending on what state you're in, you might have an option, you may not. It's all different all over the country. With that said, what are you hearing from parents and students that, because I think of this as a person that's in academia myself, is there's kids that can handle the online and are doing really well throughout. And you just explained this a little while ago, throughout the pandemic, being at home, being with their families, their siblings, whatever it may be. But there's also these kids, and I've taught some of these kids in the past, that come from rough homes and rough backgrounds in general. And a lot of those kids go to school to get away from the stuff that they encounter at home, whether it's drugs, whether it's gang violence, whatever it may be. So can you talk to the viewers about what you would recommend to parents that, I guess I should say, that are in that other arrangement where the kids are, basically going to school to get away from those bad environments, whether it's drugs, gangs, guns, whatever it may be?
Well, and again, those are real issues, and there are many children who not only go to school to get away from bad family situations, but also to eat. I mean, they don't have enough food. I mean, there's a terrible sort of hunger crisis in America because of COVID now. So they actually go to school to get one hot meal a day. So yeah, we have these poverty issues and these, as you say, domestic violence. We have real social issues that we're not dealing with. So if you're asking me, what parents can do, they should advocate for the schools to open again. I mean, it is important. At the beginning of COVID, I was saying, for everybody to be safe, it's actually important that these lockdown situations took place. But at this point, I think with people being vaccinated, it's very important for kids to be able to get back to school. Also, so those kids are in an environment where they have other adults who may be healthier, more emotionally balanced, good role models for them, and also people that they seek out for comfort and also advice. If you have a 12-year-old whose mother or father is suffering from alcoholism or drug abuse, they may or may not use that as a resource. But the idea of having more social workers in the schools, having teachers more available to children, so when a child goes to school, they not only get a hot meal and they can get away from the crisis at home, but they also have other adults who may be healthier to turn to and get comfort from.
Erica, can you talk to us about your new book out, Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters, please?
Well, it's a book that's based on my experience as a therapist in New York City for the past over 30 years. I was seeing an increase in children being diagnosed with mental health disorders at a younger and younger age and being medicated at a younger age. And I was becoming very concerned. And in my practice, I was connecting it to the absence of mothers or primary attachment figures in those children's lives in the first 3 years on a moment-to-moment basis. So I was seeing mothers being less involved with their children in the first 3 years, and I was seeing an increase in things like ADHD and anxiety and depression and early signs of behavioral problems and aggression in children. And I sort of saw that connection, and then I started looking at the research. So for about 13 years, I looked at all the research in neuroscience and epigenetics and attachment, and basically all the research was backing up what I was seeing in my practice, which is that mothers are not just emotionally necessary for children in the first 1,000 days, but they're biologically necessary in a number of ways. They regulate children's emotions, keeping their emotions from going too high and too low, meaning they regulate things like distress in children. They buffer children from stress, because we're not supposed to be exposed to great amounts of stress for the first 3 years. And they do things like they teach children social cues, how to connect with others deeply. They make them feel emotionally secure, which is the foundation for mental health. So my book really is based on all of the neuroscience and attachment research that basically proves that mothers are critical to children's mental health, because at the end of 3 years or 1,000 days, 85% of our right brain is developed. And that right brain is responsible for things like emotional regulation and resilience to stress.
I definitely want to go into that, but tapping onto what you just spoke about with ADHD, we hear a lot of people throughout the early stages of life, and even as teenagers too, and even past that, people push the medication aspect whether it's through counseling, and I know some people work good with medication, and some people may need medication to fight through the mental health issues that they're going through, because everybody's body's different, everybody's going through different crises in their lives. I get it. But do you feel like a lot of doctors really push medication on people before trying to figure it out, whether it's through therapy, just in general? I think that's a big thing that a lot of people do have success in, is therapy, instead of, just pumping medication in their bodies.
Well, so there's a movement to take the D off of ADHD. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is not a disorder. It is a symptom of things like anxiety and depression. Right. So, we talk about the fight or flight response in human beings. Our natural response when we're under stress and when we're frightened is to go into a fight or flight state. It is our natural neurological state. And ADHD is the flight piece of it. It causes things like distractibility, inability to sit still. It is our body's desire to flee from stressful situations. Right. And so we don't really want to look at the origins of these symptoms. We just want to slap a label on them, call them a disorder, and then medicate them away. There's a wonderful documentary which I recommend to your listeners if they're interested in this issue of how we're over medicating children in America and adults as well. It's called Medicating Normal. And it's a wonderful documentary. I was on a panel for it, and it really says it all. I mean, we really, as a country, are very uncomfortable with discomfort. We cannot bear the idea of discomfort. Discomfort is part of the human condition. And so when we're uncomfortable, or when we're in pain, or when we feel scared, the burden then is on us to understand what we're frightened of, what is motivating, and what is causing these feelings. And we don't want to do that in our society. And psychiatrists facilitate this. They want to medicate away pain, as opposed to saying, right, pain in this case is a signal feeling. Physical pain and emotional pain is a signal feeling that there is something deeper to look at, some deeper conflict, some deeper trauma. But that takes time, and that takes talk therapy. And that takes really us wanting to understand the origins of our pain. And as a society, we've moved towards just whitewashing pain, basically.
As we end the interview, Dr. Komisar, can you just tell people where they can find more about you, where they can get the book? And also, I know the new book is coming out. We teased it a little bit throughout the program, but where they can get, or when it's coming out, and where they can get it in general.
So they can go to www.komisar, KOMISAR.com. And they can also buy the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters. And the new book is coming out in October for parents who are raising adolescents. And that one is called Chicken Little, The Sky Is Not Falling, Raising Resilient Adolescents in This New Age of Anxiety.
I appreciate your time.